Your prime emails. We can't award the PO until your CMMC status shows up in SPRS. If that sentence spiked your blood pressure, you're not alone. Today on the Q Cast, we'll demystify CMMC, what it is, who it applies to, and how the levels and assessments work, and whether companies like QT9 should pursue certification now or wait. Our guest is Rhia Dancel from NSF, an information security leader and CMMC veteran. Let's jump in. Welcome to the QCast, the show for leaders navigating quality, compliance, and security in regulated markets. I'm your host, Christian Reyes. Quick reminder, this podcast shares general information, not legal advice. Always verify requirements in your specific solicitations and contracts. Today's guest is Rhia Dancel. Rhia is the Senior Manager of Information Security and is also lead CCA at NSF, where she has been for over 11 years. NSF is proudly the first C3PAO in Michigan and one of the few C3PAOs that also operate as a certification body, working with standards such as ISO 27001, 9001, AS9100, and NIST frameworks. Rhia, it's great to have you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Christian.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. NSF is actually our own certification body here at QT9. You've been to our facility, right?
It's beautiful. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
I can see how you guys all stay there and not work from home.
So it definitely makes it easier when you have a golf simulator, a gym, a basketball court. Definitely takes the sting off of going in. But unfortunately, I did not have a chance to meet you when last time you were here in person. But perhaps next time when recert comes up. But to get started here, very top level, what problem is CMMC trying to solve?
Great question. Well, back in the day, the contractors in the defense industrial base were expected to self-assess their NIST 800-171 compliance, because, nothing says secure like good intentions, right? And so no one, to the surprise of no one, that didn't work, which underscored the need for a formal certification framework. So that's where CMMC entered with accountability and their 320 assessment objectives.
That's quite a lot. That is more than a handful. What does your day-to-day look like at NSF supporting clients on CMMC?
Okay, that's a good one. Supporting clients on CMMC, we really just give them, the information that they need in order to go through a successful assessment. That's really just providing them the resources that is available either through the Cyber AB website or through DoD. And after that, it's really just a matter of going through the phase 1 and phase 2 with them. And because we're the certification body, so we don't do any consulting, but we will be able to provide mock assessments to OSCs, which is organizations seeking certification. So we do provide that. But other than that, we are really just going through that certification with them and hopefully issuing that cert to them at the end of it.
Fantastic. And you were saying that the DoD moved from self-assessments or self-attestations to verified status. And that's mainly because the self-assessments weren't working, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Well, so there are different levels, correct, within CMMC? Level 1, 2, and 3, correct?
Yes.
How do those differ at a high level?
Well, so level 1 is really, it's if you handle federal contract information, and that requires implementation of 15 basic cybersecurity requirements. If you handle controlled unclassified information, that's level 2, and that addresses, the protection of CUI and implementation of all 320 assessment objectives. And then level 3, that also addresses the protection of CUI in addition to the protection against advanced persistent threats, PTs, and that's outlined in NIST 800-172, which is the supplement for NIST 800-171 for enhanced security requirements.
Okay. Is CMMC more of a security framework or a contract gate? Or both?
Both. Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely both. You want to make sure that you're in compliance with all 320 assessment objectives, but also in order to even be eligible for contracts, you will need to have some sort of level of CMMC depending on what type of information you handle, whether it's FCI or CUI.
Okay. So if I'm understanding correctly, level 1 maps to basic safeguarding for FCI, whereas level 2 aligns to NIST 800-171 for CUI. And level 3 adds the NIST 800-172 controls for the most critical programs.
Absolutely. Yes.
Got it. Got it. We're making progress. I'm learning. So now that I understand that, let's try and unpack scope and evidence a little bit. But before we get into that, who actually needs CMMC status?
Yeah, well, that is actually a really great question. So, applicability of CMMC, really, the primes are the first one to feel the impact of CMMC. So, we're talking Lockheed, Boeing, General Dynamics, Raytheon. They've already flowed down these requirements to their subcontractors. So, really, if you handle any type of FCI or CUI, or even, admire it from afar, you will need to comply with a level of CMMC.
Okay. It's a pretty wide range. A lot of people fall under that, a lot of companies. So it applies to primes and all tiers of subcontractors that touch FCI and CUI.
Absolutely. Yes.
What's a quick way to tell if a contract will require CMMC? Is there a specific clause or section that people should keep an eye out for?
Well, so CMMC is governed by two rules. The first one is the 32 CFR rule, and that really was the implementation of the CMMC program. And then the 48 CFR rule will become effective November 10th. And that is where you will start to see CMMC as part of contract clauses. So, really, if you are by November 10th, we're expecting to see the CMMC requirements in new contracts, and there is a rollout period. So, we'll start to see it in new contracts and then option periods. So, by the end of November 2028, you'll start to see CMMC requirements in every single contract dealing with the defense space.
Okay, so it'll be a little bit clearer come November of 2028. And just to take it back a second, I know you did mention these earlier, FCI and CUI, but for the sake of our listeners, FCI is federal contract information and
Yes.
CUI is controlled unclassified information.
Yes. Yeah. So here I could give you an example, Christian. So FCI, that is really, like it says, it's federal contract information. So that's really contract details and communication about, contract execution. So all things contract related. CUI, it's sensitive, but it's unclassified information. So it's basically the government's version of, don't post this on Instagram, really. So it's sensitive, but unclassified. So we're thinking, engineering drawings or technical data, anything really that's labeled or marked CUI, it's CUI.
And generally speaking, is that stated on those types of documents themselves?
Nah, that'd be too easy, Christian. No, not at all. You pretty much, there's no fun in that. You have to really make your own CUI conclusions. Going with your gut instinct is really what contractors need to do. But not a lot of information is marked or labeled CUI. But if you think that you have CUI, then you should really be safeguarding it as it is CUI.
Gotcha. In my research for this podcast, the acronym COTS kept coming up. Commercial off the shelf. I've never heard that before in this context. Could you define that for me?
Yes. So COTS, it's exactly right. Commercial off the shelf. So it's really anything that that is not modified. So you can just go to Best Buy and, buy that software, or just go anywhere and buy the software. If you're just getting it directly from the shelf, then, that does not have to comply with any type of CMMC requirements.
Okay. So COTS are truly excluded
It
from
is, yes,
CMMC.
because it's commercially available.
So do individual software companies within a company's digital ecosystem need to be CMMC compliant? Or is it more of a function of the ecosystem as a whole?
So if really, you need to be compliant if you think that you're going to handle CUI, or if your tier above you is flowing down that requirement to you. But really, if you don't handle CUI, there's no requirement to comply with CMMC.
Okay. So if your work processes or stores or transmits FCI or CUI for DoD, you can expect CMMC in the solicitation.
Absolutely. Or if anyone above you, like a prime or a contractor, will flow down that requirement to you and provide you CUI, then you do need to comply with level 2.
Okay, so the flow down reaches.
Yes.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So I'm still rounding out my knowledge here. We're definitely making progress. But let's go from theory to practice, as talking namely scoping and assessments. Level 2, how do you scope the environment? What's in and what can logically be out of scope?
Yeah, so scoping really that is extremely critical. It's primarily based on details that are provided in your system security plan, your network diagram, and your asset inventory. So really whatever information that you put as part of those documents, that is part of the scope of your level 2 assessment. And that's really something that will be determined during phase 1 of your CMMC assessment.
Okay. And you did not mention, you did allude to this earlier, but what does a C3PAO actually do and how is it different from a consultant?
A C3PAO, we are the assessors. So we're the ones that evaluate your environment. We look at implementation of the 320 assessment objectives. Whereas a consultant, they will help you with remediation. They provide help prior to your CMMC assessment.
Okay. So how are requirements tested against NIST 800A objectives? What counts as met versus not met?
Okay, that's a great question. Well, really, it is when we go through your CMMC environment, we're looking at all 320 assessment objectives. And in order for those assessment objectives to be considered met, you're going to have to provide evidence through either through testing, examination, or documentation that these controls are met. And if a control requires, a technical piece of evidence, you can provide documentation, but it would be, as far as scoring it met or not met, it'll be more definitive if you provide, a technical piece of evidence through testing rather than through documentation.
Okay, that it has a little bit more weight to it as
Absolutely.
opposed.
Yes.
That makes sense. That makes sense. What's unique about level 3 and who performs those assessments?
Level 3. So level 3 does include everything from level 2, but it also includes the protection against the advanced persistent threats, which is in 172. And so you have to go through a level 2 assessment with a C3PAO. And then once you pass that, then you can actually go to the DoD and ask them for that level 3 assessment.
Okay. Okay. And kind of the last question in this piece, if we use a cloud that touches CUI, what's the quick test for acceptability?
That's a great question. The quick test is really just to go on that FedRAMP marketplace and make sure that they are either FedRAMP Moderate or FedRAMP equivalent. If they're FedRAMP equivalent, they won't be in the marketplace. But if they are FedRAMP Moderate, then you can see in the FedRAMP marketplace.
Okay. Okay. So let's get tactical. Companies ask, where do we start and what proof do assessors expect? If a team starts this week, what are their first 5 tasks?
Really, you want to make sure that your system security plan is well documented. I'd say, okay, the very first step is really you want to go through a self-assessment. You want to go through NIST 800-171 controls and see what your gaps and your deficiencies are. And then at that point, you want to make sure that you remediate those gaps and deficiencies, and then you document everything. So you want to make sure that your system security plan is well documented. Your implementation is part of that system security plan. You want to make sure that that is all well defined. And then the network diagram is also another really critical piece of documentation that you need to have in place. And then also your asset inventory, which categorizes your hardware and your software that is part of your CMMC assessment scope. You want to make sure that that all is well defined and documented, and it aligns with each other, and it's consistent.
If it's not documented,
Huh?
it didn't happen, right?
Absolutely. Yes. So even those practices that are assumed or, implicit, you want to make sure that those practices are also documented.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What's the minimum viable evidence package that an assessor expects?
Well, for phase 1, we're taking a look at the system security plan, network diagram, and asset inventory. So those 3 pieces of evidence is really what is going to determine the scope of your assessment. So if that's inconsistent or we're not able to fully align what's in your asset inventory versus what is in your network diagram, then the scope of the assessment can't be determined. And so it's really back to phase one if you can't show that, that scope is well defined.
Gotcha. Time for a decision lens. For a software vendor like QT9, where we serve regulated industries with QMS and ERP, when, if ever, does it make sense to pursue CMMC?
Well, we talked about this earlier, that 48 CFR rule becomes effective November 10th, and that's when CMMC requirements will start to appear in contracts. So if a software vendor feels that they are going to be that they are going to receive CUI, or they will have that flow down to them, then this is the time to really to start to get a C3PAO engaged and get scheduled, because right now with that 48 CFR rule becoming effective November 10th, that's going to increase that demand for assessors and for assessments. And so that's going to push back the timeline for everyone if you're not ready to, or if you want to start to engage a C3PAO, that's really going to make the expectations a little longer than what you may have anticipated.
Okay, so there's I mean, it makes sense. This is a very timely episode that we're doing, and really couldn't be more timely. And so ultimately, when should a software vendor get its own CMMC versus just relying on a customer's scope?
Really, now is the time. Nothing better like the present, Christian. So, if you're ready, if QT9 is ready to go through a CMMC assessment, I say go through it now, because really at the end of it, you don't know when something's going to pop up, a contract you'll want to bid on, or customers that are asking you for this. So this is the best time to do it now, really, before that 48 CFR becomes effective. This is the time. C3PAOs have time right now or not, but there could be, there could be a crunch at some point later on after the 48 CFR becomes effective.
So it sounds like you're at least potentially expecting the demand to exceed the supply of.
Absolutely. Yes.
You guys will be busy. That's for sure. So if a company doesn't host or touch CUI, is there still a business case for level one as a trust signal?
Yes, absolutely. Because level one is really basic safeguarding requirements. So if you were to go through a level one, that's actually a self-assessment. So that's something that you would do yourself for those 15 controls. And you wouldn't get an official certificate, but you can say that you self-assessed to level one and you're complying with those basic security requirements. So really anyone should go through that, because they're basic. You want to make sure that you have certain things in place and there's training done, and the personnel is aware of what could be what could be considered a threat. You want to make sure that all of that is really part of your organization and your model.
Absolutely. I mean, it like you said, it's not. I don't want to say basic requirements, but it's things that for all intents and purposes, most companies should be doing if you're hosting, some type of sensitive data or information. How do primes view vendors without a visible CMMC status in SPRS?
So primes, when you are eligible, when it's contract award time and there is a sub that isn't CMMC certified, you shouldn't be working with them as a prime, because really that is the whole part of CMMC. It's everyone who is part of that contract should be some level of CMMC based off of what it is that you handle. And if you don't handle, and if you aren't certified to that level of CMMC, then you aren't eligible to even have award of that contract.
Gotcha. So what timeline what's the timeline for a realistic level 2 readiness for C3PAO assessment?
If you're starting from zero?
Yes.
So if you're starting from zero, I would say give yourself a year to really go through and have implementation. If you want to do it a little quicker, then you can establish an enclave for your CUI, and so what that does is it reduces the complexity of your CMMC scope. And so you are only really, when you're going through that CMMC assessment, you're only looking at the enclave, and you're not looking at everything else that's part of the enterprise. And that will make your that will make implementation of CMMC a little faster, because you're only dealing with certain departments, or certain software and systems that process, store, or transmit CUI. And also leverage those leverage those solutions, because that will help you, because you'll be able to inherit some of those controls from those FedRAMP compliance, and it'll lessen the burden for the team.
Gotcha. I've actually not heard that term before, enclave. So that's good advice. It's basically, if I'm understanding, it's like compartmentalization of what controls need to control.
Yeah. Yes.
Got it. So ultimately, it sounds like, bottom line, you want to tie the investment to your go-to market. And if your roadmap includes handling customer CUI or selling into programs that do, then CMMC becomes a strategic enabler, not just a cost. Now, to kind of wrap up here, we're just going to do what I call a lightning round. And basically, it's just quick hits, true or false. So I'm going to throw a couple statements at you and just, tell me true or false. Commercial off-the-shelf only suppliers are exempt.
True.
Level 3 assessments are performed by DIBCAC, not C3PAOs.
True.
You complete an assessment once and you're done.
False.
That kind of goes back to what we mentioned earlier, where you plan for annual affirmations?
Annual affirmation, and then there is 3-year recertification.
Got it. All right. Well, that wraps up our lightning round. And that wraps up our time for today.
Thank you.
But Rhia, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate you coming on here and really making CMMC practical and taking the time. So thank you.
Thank you, Christian. I really appreciate you doing this. It's a really great educational piece for everyone too, who is looking into CMMC. They don't know if they need it, but this has been great. I really enjoyed this a lot. So thank you.
Awesome. We've enjoyed having you on. And where can people find you or reach out to NSF if they want to?
Yes, you can go to nsf.org and you can look up information security, and you can see how to get a hold of us. We're also in the Cyber AV marketplace as a C3PAO, so you can see us there too.
Awesome. And we'll put links to those things in the show notes for all of our listeners. And thank you again, Rhia. We really appreciate you coming on. And thank you to all of our listeners that tuned in today. If you enjoyed our show or if you found it helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe. And please share the QCast with a colleague, or drop us a rating. Reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you guys. So until next time, build equality and stay compliant.